if the river finds a way through that pile of debris, what will happen? Blatten, this is the flooded area. So the water will come down. It will pass Villa Kippel. These two are evacuated. Then we have the dam in Ferden. The inhabitants at 253, they are on evacuation alert. So here you see the lake that is being created by the dam that is in Ferden. They have already released some water in order to catch that, but then the water and the debris would flow further downstream, and you see how far that is. It's a steep valley, and then we see the next village. It's called Goppenstein. This is where the flood would go, and then just a little bit further you will see which villages have already received the evacuation alert. And you see this is kilometers and miles after miles. It would run down the valley. There's the village of Gampel. They have received a preliminary evacuation order, and Stake as well. So over 3,000 people. And then that river would get into the other river, into the Rhone. So the question is now, and the danger is now, will the river break through with a bang through that mass and pile of debris, or will it go a little bit more smoothly? But the risk is also all that debris that would come from the logs, the trees that huge rock / glacier slide has brought down with it. And then of course, unfortunately, the debris from all these destroyed homes that would flow towards the dam. And the dam that is there, it creates electricity. So we can't have that debris and the logs clog their system. For now, they will probably stop creating electricity if more water and debris is coming through the dam. But there's one thing that is a little bit concerning. They're saying, okay, we feel a little bit better today on Saturday because it seems some water has started to leak a little bit over that pile of debris. But is the water level really going down? You see the flooded homes. Is it going down? Because one thing that looks a little bit strange, and I'll get to that, it seems the water level is still rising, despite the fact that there is some water leaking on top of that pile of debris. And one of my viewers has written me a comment, and that's very interesting. He said, zoom in, look at that picture, look at the road. Well, what do we see? We see a road and we see water. So how can we tell what's happening? But then it got me. He said, well, if water's receding, you would see that on the road. You would see like mud or stains. You would see an area where it's drying out. But the line between road and water is very sharp. So that tells us the water's still there and the water is rising. Because would it recede? Of course, we'd have a sharp line between road and water, but the road from where it was receding, it would be stained, because in other flood areas, doesn't have to be a flood from a collapsed mountain or glacier, but if the water's receding, even on satellite pictures, if it leaves stains and markers on the road, and that's not the case here. So it seems that despite the fact that something starts leaking through that over 1.4 miles, 2.1 kilometer long piece of debris and crashed mountain / glacier, it's still increasing that lake, and that increases the risk of a sudden flash flood through that rubble. And the one thing that is really, really bad is the weather forecast says rain for the weekend. And if you look at all the slopes here around that crash site, very, very steep slopes, there's some rivers and some streams that are already leaking down water again. So if we have heavy rain, that could fill up the lake even further. That could erode the mountainsides even further. And yes, what we see if we zoom in here, there's this area that seems to gradually leaking water onto that rubble side. But you also see the area is very narrow where the water is trying to get through. And the problem is the debris that I mentioned, logs, wood, pieces of roofs, plants, trees. It clogs that narrow area that has opened up to get some relief, to get some of the water through. What we see on the other side of that blocked dam, debris dam, there is some little tiny water leaking through, because it seems to be also leaking through the whole debris, not only on top, also through it. And here comes the question, how much does that water weaken the whole pile? Because don't forget, this is not solid rock. This is a massive glacier that came down. First, the tip of the high mountain came down and was falling on the glacier, and the weight was pushing the glacier down. So the ice, that's their guess, will not melt quickly. But if it does, through water, rainfall, it leaves an empty space. So the whole pile here could become even more unstable. And could it block then more water? Because now maybe the glacier and the ice is like an area where the water might get through or even melt. So they're not out of the woods at all. And the scientists are saying it's very, very hard to predict what will really happen here. And if we look at the aerial pictures, it's kind of clear how massive this blockage really is. And they're saying it'll take months, if not years, to determine how we can solve that issue with this huge pile of debris. So unfortunately, these homes that have been flooded there, I don't see them being free from water within the next few days. For me, the most critical point is the rain. If it's raining heavily and all that water comes down the mountain slides, what do we do then? It'll fill up and it will erode. It's an extreme situation there in Switzerland. The view of this disaster zone is absolutely heartbreaking. Almost the whole valley lies beneath this massive, massive mountain of debris. Despite some kind of drainage, the water levels remain dangerously high, and they might even rise up again. Because how this little tiny leak looks right now, it's just not enough outflow. Less water is draining than water is flowing in, and the weather is getting warmer. It was quite warm on Friday, it's warm on Saturday, so additional meltwater coming from all the mountains is feeding the flooding and is raising the water levels further, in addition to the weather in the forecast and the rain. And yes, we see the water is carving out a path. It's always flooding towards the lowest point. I know this when I'm digging drainage ditches on my farm, on my land, and then you have a blockage, and then you open a tiny little hole and it starts flowing. It's so rewarding. So this is what the River Lonza is doing here too. That's inevitable. It will definitely happen. And you see also here on the picture, if the terrain is ahead of the river is higher than what's behind it, the water will pool up until it overflows. It's like a bathtub with the overflow drain, and then it flows into a new direction. And eventually, it, wherever it goes, it will spill over and flow downhill. This will definitely happen. But where it goes, really, that depends heavily on the structure of the terrain, or whether the debris there is very loose or compacted. These rocks, I mentioned the glacier and the ice that's mixed in between. So will the water that is leaking now form a canyon, and how much of it is capable of still moving of this debris? As this is all such a big mud pile, nobody knows which materials might shift, or whether large blocks of rocks or trees might create new dams down the road and backlog it again. So if we're lucky and there is a deep trench that's forming, and then the water really pushes through it with like heavy force, because we've got the weight of that lake behind it that is really putting a lot of power towards it. But it's uncertain how this will play out. So right now, it seems like the system is just starting a little bit to release pressure and begin its descent. And once it fully flows out, yes, then you have to see how the terrain allows the outflow to continue. So if it rains this weekend, until the water comes down from the mountains, we will probably see something late weekend, Monday maybe, so that the water levels will rise and put more pressure on that. So the meltwater, the lake, the rain, they combine. The situation could be very dire, very, very dangerous, very, very quickly. That's why the residents are on standby further down to get their go-backs and get out. So the rescue team and the experts, they want to build barriers now, and they're already doing this. Definitely not to divert the water, but to catch floating debris. And I'll show you a picture how this looked last year when the Lötschental River landslide let the water, when the water was breaking through. It had dammed the river too. Thankfully, there were no big settlements. But when it broke through, the debris was flowing miles and miles, hundreds of miles, even down into the Vancouver area, the Fraser River, and you saw the brown water and the debris floating. And in this narrow valley, this is a problem, because that debris could form new obstructions. And that would be very, very catastrophic, because the current very slow drainage is actually the safest scenario, because now the water is gradually seeping away without triggering large-scale movement of debris. But in some areas, the situation is very fragile and the land is clearly unstable, and there's spots where chunks have already broken off. So now if we have the heavy rainfall and the warm weather, that instability could worsen and a landslide could block path or change the water's course suddenly. And that's the tricky thing in mountains with bad weather. And everything, the debris, the water, could really start moving like a volcanic lahar, like a mudslide. I'm showing you this video here, what happened in Italy, in Sicily. Absolutely crazy. That was just rainy weather and the lahar coming down from Etna. So if something like this happened in that narrow Swiss valley, that would be disastrous. We're not there yet, thankfully. But for now, it's all about how much water will be added to that and how will it drain. It looks like for now, but the rain hasn't set in yet, that it's kind of stable. The problem is that in some areas from that landslide, the elevation levels are just too high. The water can't drain through these obstructions. And so it's choosing a specific path instead, which leads to the Lonza River. And then the meltwater from the glacier above, that's still there, already replenishing the flow there. Not much yet, not a threat yet. But you see that behind the dam, from these little streams, the river is kind of flowing again from that water alone. Very reduced rate, but it is flowing. So this means the lower valley, the lower basin of the Lonza River, this lake from the Ferden dam that was emptied earlier, and you see this is quite a massive dam, they have to watch that. What is going to happen if there's water building up again, especially if it carries more debris? That complicates everything downstream. It will need, in my opinion, a lot of effort to prevent further complications so that they can make sure that this doesn't turn into a worse disaster than it already is. The experts are saying, well, right now, it's too unstable, it's too dangerous, we can't do anything, we can't even walk on that pile of debris. We need to wait and we need to watch how things develop in the coming hours and days. Will the drainage continue? Will there be new movement triggered by water pressure? Are deeper layers becoming unstable due to water infiltration? Is this underground washed out tunnels that we don't even see right now? They have new tracking instruments, they have new sensors that they're installing that will hopefully help them with satellite images to kind of track this. People are still under shock, and the authorities and also psychologists that have been brought in, they say you have to give space to the feelings that arise as a reaction to a completely crazy situation and then name them. You see a picture here of the Ferden reservoir that had been emptied completely to catch the floodwater. This is filling up again from the streams that are coming down into the river after the big mudslide, but also the little stuff that leaks through. So it's filling up again. The reason is the dammed Lonza River, which is now flowing down the entire length of the debris cone with a little stream. And also, aside from the big debris, the river also carries a lot of sand, which means the water from the dam can no longer be turbined, means directed through the power generating turbines. That creates another problem because it's power that is generated. So they have to ensure that the reservoir can fulfill its retention function in the event of a debris flow. That's what the Valais State Council has said, and they have instructed the power plant operator to open the dam's bottom outlet system as needed. So this targeted measure will allow the water to continue flowing into the Lonza Gorge after the reservoir. So the affected areas, including the dammed lake, the Lonza River, and the Ferden reservoir, are being monitored, and numerous measuring devices have been installed, and they are assessing this continuously, and hopefully it will not escalate. Also, unfortunately, due to the uncertain situation in the Lötschental Valley, the search for a missing person can currently not be continued. They said as soon as we get the go-ahead, we will resume the search. A 64-year-old man was supposedly in the area, probably within the evacuation area, when the collapse happened. So I will keep you updated, guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please leave it a like, subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, guys, I have a Buy Me a Coffee site. You can support me with coffee there, and I can answer you. They allow me a 30-second video message, and then you can message me back. God, do you hear the sirens? What are they doing? Where was I? Now I'm losing my red line at the end of the video. No, the coffee, check it out. We can actually video chat with each other, which I think is cool. I will answer every message. It might take some time because the mountain slide here keeps me busy. It's kind of at the moment on the slide with Silky and not on the pulse with Silky. So check out the videos in the end screen, guys. It's really, really interesting. Gives you a lot of knowledge. And I see you very, very soon, safe and sound. Bye-bye.